Well, it's a busy time in Madison at the state capitol. Wisconsin Republicans are making efforts to change the state's abortion ban, increase penalties on reckless drivers, and push for more resource officers in schools. Our Capitol Correspondent Emilee Fannon covers those issues with WisPolitics Editor J.R. on this morning's Capitol Connection.
This week, Republicans unveiled their bill to make changes to the 1849 abortion ban. Now, this comes after the issue was a hot-button issue in the midterms and is really a central focus in the state Supreme Court race. First, let's just let everyone know what the bill would do. Abortion would only be allowed during the first trimester, which is 12 weeks for victims of rape or incest. And that criteria for how that would be determined is really left out of the bill. It also clarifies that medical professionals will not face any felony charges if they believe abortion is necessary to save the life of the mother. Now, this comes after some medical professionals said they feared about performing abortions because the state law, the 1849 ban, was really vague. So these two things clarify it, but it was quickly shot down by Governor Tony Evers, who said he basically went back on his pledge, saying, I am not going to sign any legislation that doesn't put the same rights that were in order before Roe v. Wade was overturned. But bigger picture here, JR, there's a lot of politics behind this and the timing of why Republicans did that this week.
What was fascinating was how quickly it was floated and killed in the Capitol. So you had a 9 a.m. news conference to announce this bill. Not long after, you had Democrats knocking it. You had both of the biggest anti-abortion groups in Wisconsin raising questions about the bill. And then by early afternoon, Devin Lemmy, the Senate Majority Leader, said it's never going to see the floor of the Senate. What's fascinating about this topic from a big picture perspective is Republicans are in a box. And if you talk to Republican operatives, they will tell you they are going to have a tough time winning statewide elections as long as this issue's out there because it motivates voters. They're on the wrong side, quote unquote, with most voters on it. But you also have this dynamic in the caucuses where even the authors, Robin Vos, the Assembly Speaker, said he hoped to get to 50 Republican votes in the Assembly. Mary Felskowski, Republican from up north, said they did not have the votes. They can't get the bill passed out of their caucuses right now. They would need Democratic support. Democrats are like, we're not going to support this bill because it doesn't what we want to do, which is repeal the ban, period. So it remains alive. How do you get out of that box when you can't get your party to agree and Democrats are saying, we're not going to go there because we don't agree with what you're trying to do? It's a challenge for them. And again, last fall, normal election environment, it should be a good year for Republicans. I mean, an incumbent Democrat in the White House, not doing very well in the polls, but yet Democrats had a pretty good night, especially Governor Evers. How's that happen? Abortion drove a lot of that, what happened last fall.
And the timing of this bill, of course, you know, what happens in this bill is they circle it for support for other lawmakers to sign on for it. But there wouldn't be any votes on this bill for another 2 weeks because it takes time. You have to have public hearings on the bill, which would be after the April 4th election. And Speaker Vos even said this clearly. Well, our hope is that Dan Kelly wins, so we don't have to go through this bring this issue before the state Supreme Court. Instead, he believes it should be figured out here in the state legislature when lawmakers enacted it so many years ago.
And it doesn't take the issue off the table for the Supreme Court race, and it actually, I've had Republicans complain, it kind of like amplifies the issue and deflates the base in some ways to have this going on right for the election. We'll see how big a deal it plays, this bill itself, but yeah, the timing is just kind of interesting to have it come up now.
And it was also a busy week in the Capitol because the Assembly was back in session on Tuesday, where they took up a lot of school safety measures, specifically SROs, which are school resource officers. Now, back in 2020, Milwaukee and Madison, the state's two largest school districts, voted to remove SROs, which was in wake of the George Floyd protests. So what these bills kind of really reflected that, and they really target Milwaukee specifically because if there is a high number of incidents in schools, they have to reach a certain threshold, I believe over 100 incidents, and 25 of those have to result in arrest on school grounds, then that school district would have to hire a school resource officer. The other bill that kind of goes right into that would mandate public and private high schools to track how often students commit crimes on school properties. Now, schools would then have to report these statistics to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. What Republicans say is the whole goal is that this will increase safety, and it's about letting parents know when they look at the school report card, there was this many incidents, maybe I shouldn't send my child there, or maybe I should. But Democrats argue these bills are not necessary, and once again is a bill that targets MPS.
And you have a COVID-19 angle to it. So remember, Governor Evers has had sole authority to spend COVID-19 federal aid. Republicans have tried numerous ways to dictate how that money is going to be spent. He has shot down all of them. Anytime you introduce that angle of using COVID money to reimburse the costs of these SROs, it causes a problem. And just look, it was a partisan split on the bill. It tells you it's not going to go past the governor's veto pen most likely.
And looking ahead next week, the Assembly and Senate will be in session to take up reckless driving bills that the real focus behind them is to increase penalties. This has been a huge issue in Milwaukee. We've seen city officials also create a task force hoping to combat the carjacking and reckless driving that has been really on the rise in this city. So here's what one of the bills would do. It would raise fines and other penalties if you commit a reckless driving offense. Another bill would allow local governments to enact an ordinance permitting police to impound vehicles that were used in reckless driving incidents when the person is cited for it and they own the vehicle. Also, if they have not even paid the fine. Now, big question here is, where do Milwaukee officials stand? Of those that I've talked to, they support these, and they're pretty in line with the task force that city officials have created. We also know that Governor Tony Evers has proposed some similar measures in his budget.
Fascinating, again, the chasm between Republican lawmakers and the Democratic governor of the governor wants to do this, but in the budget, Republicans say, no, we'll do it this way. Because remember, anytime there's a spending component to a bill, the governor uses partial veto authority and change the language. By doing it in a separate bill, it gives Republicans more control of the language, make sure they get what they want, not what Evers wants to tweak this veto pen.
All right, that will do it for this week. Thanks so much for joining us.